Well, I just watched the Borderlands movie, and I really wish I hadn't. Somehow they took the very simple yet engaging story from the original game and oversimplified it while also trashing the entire lore of the series, which seems pointless given what the movie actually does with the writing that they used. They took some of the most beloved characters from the franchise and either did absolutely nothing with them or outright ruined them. Just for your information, if for some reason you really want to watch this movie, I will be spoiling it. I really advise against watching this movie unless you can do it for free or something. But even then, I still wouldn't. Trust me, I want to save you your time because it is far more valuable than this movie is. You've been warned. This movie starts off with an intro to the universe in the background and lore and story of Pandora and everything else that's going on. It right off the bat skims over sirens and not really going into details about them proper. In fact, they missed the entire point of sirens in the original game for being a mystery. They did proceed to give a very wrong backstory on Pandora. I can understand taking some liberties for a movie, but the changes they made were pointless and did nothing to help the plot of the movie. They stated that Pandora was once a peaceful planet until the vault hunters and corporations looking for the vault showed up. In the original game, Pandora was settled as a mining colony by Dahl and colonists, but it wasn't worth it to the Dahl Corporation. They withdrew their stake eventually on the planet and they left behind their machines, employees, and labor force. Dahl was known to use a prison labor force. The prisoners went on to become the bandits and psychos that we see across the planet on Pandora. Pandora was never a nice place to live, despite what this movie is trying to tell us at the beginning. It was always a very difficult place to live on because of the weather and climate, and not to mention the fauna being very aggressive, bandits notwithstanding. The first character we're introduced to is Tiny Tina, who is being rescued by Roland. They make sure that we're aware that Kevin Hart is playing Roland because they make a joke about his height. We don't really get any explanation as to why Roland is rescuing Tiny Tina at this point, or why he's betraying Atlas. I mean, it's clear that he's a soldier based on his outfit, but it's not clear as to why he's doing this right now. The movie never really explains why Roland betrays Atlas. In the original game, he was an ex-Atlas soldier, but he left them on his own accord and was honorably discharged. It doesn't really go into any other details about that too much. In the movie, they want to make sure you're aware that Roland has betrayed Atlas. But to be honest with you, and I'll just tell you now, throughout the whole movie, they don't really give much of a motive. They give some motive, but not enough to really make any sense. In fact, Roland doesn't really have that many lines in the movie. Most of the lines are spoken by Lilith and Tiny Tina. Not many of their characters have that many lines. I mean, I think even Claptrap has more lines than Roland does. And even the lines that Roland does have makes it feel like he's just Kevin Hart, not Roland. I really feel like he's just there to shoot people because that's really all he does most of the time anyways. He's just a background character practically. Krieg is even portrayed worse in this movie. He is treated as a one-liner character that just kind of goes around and does things with the party. He just shows up at the beginning to help Roland and Tiny Tina escape. They excuse this as him being Tiny Tina's friend. Okay, I guess, but the thing is that Krieg is actually one of the more complex characters in the entire game, with the fact that he has two consciousnesses. One is buried deep within, who is the original Psyche, and the other one is the Psycho that you see in the game that's portrayed openly. They kind of communicate with each other internally to try to come to agreements on how to operate, and that's how Krieg is kind of different from the other Psychos and why he's not as violent towards everyone, and he can make friends with people in some ways. They skim over a lot of interesting parts about Krieg and just make him like a one-liner throwaway character that's just kind of there. And it really hurts it because Krieg is probably the most interesting character in Borderlands. And could, honestly, if they made a movie about him, could probably make it compelling in some ways, but either way, I digress. I also noticed several times during the movie that the actors themselves don't even seem to want to be there. There's times where I hear the actors audibly cringe at some of the lines they're saying, and it just, they don't, I guess they just couldn't get enough takes where they didn't cringe in some way. Or, for example, I noticed that Krieg's character, he just kind of stands around a lot, but if you kind of pay attention to him, his actor, even behind the mask, almost looks bored. It's kind of amusing, honestly. After this whole escape scene, we're introduced to Grandma Lilith, who is apparently a bounty hunter. The boss of Atlas shows up in what I believe is an attempt to make him seem like a version of Handsome Jack. as this like clever and sarcastic villain, but it falls flat. The villain in this movie has so little charisma that I forget he even exists until he shows up again at the end. He states that he is Tiny Tina's father and wants her returned to him. He cannot send his troops because it's one of his own that's avoiding him, so it's hard for him to track him. So he needs an outsider like Lilith. Lilith is very reluctant to go to Pandora. However, she's offered enough money that she's willing to go, and they give her a tracker. They tell her, all you gotta do is hit the button when you find Tina, our troops will come and extract her, and you'll get your reward. While Lilith is going to Pandora, it is explained that she is actually from Pandora and that she grew up there and that she didn't want to go back because of some kind of past history there. This is not the actual case in the lore. Lilith in the game is from a planet called Dionysus and is a vault hunter who came seeking her fortune. She's also a siren who is completely aware of her powers. I noticed here that Lilith does not have her tattoos, and it seems like she probably isn't even aware that she's a siren. Anyway, she's on Pandora now, she's looking for Tiny Tina, and she comes across Marcus on his bus, which is an Easter egg to the original game. You start off on the bus in the original game, and you get dropped off at Firestone, which happens to be the destination of the said bus at this time. There's a whole joke going on here that Marcus is trying to sell her guns and claiming that she's a vault hunter when she keeps telling him she's not a vault hunter, and he's just like, why else would you be here if you're not a vault hunter? Marcus actually feels like Marcus in this movie, so I'll give him credit for that. Claptrap just kind of shows up shortly after this because I guess they didn't know how to introduce him. He was mysteriously programmed to turn on whenever Lilith returned to Pandora, and he was programmed to mysteriously help her for some unknown reason to himself. He ends up acting like a plot mover throughout this entire movie. Anytime they needed the plot to do something, usually it was because of Claptrap. I will say this, Jack Black did a pretty good job of Claptrap. Very convinced that it was Claptrap, and I thought some of his lines were decent, and he was about the only amusing character to me in the entire movie. So like I said, because Claptrap is the one that usually moves the plot along in some way, Claptrap actually helps her find Tiny Tina because he can access the Echo Net. The next scene is her killing a bandit who is working with an Alice soldier to kidnap some children. Some revelation in the movie to show that the bandits were working with Alice, I guess being paid to look for Tiny Tina on the planet. Either way, Lilith makes a point after saving the children to tell Claptrap that she didn't do it out of kindness, or rather because she needed the vehicle and they just happened to be kind of in the way. I honestly believe this line was trying to show that Lilith was trying to hide who she really was, but truthfully, it doesn't really land that way because Lilith in the entire movie so far hasn't shown that she has too much of a moral compass. She goes as far in some scenes to actually shoot people that annoy her, like Claptrap and some other characters earlier on in the movie. In the next scene, Lilith finally finds Tina, and they have this whole conversation about bringing her back to her father, and it's very clear that Tina doesn't really want to go back, but is pretending like she's just a lost little girl. I don't even know how Lilith is buying it because I'm not even buying it, but either way, Tina tricks Lilith into picking up a stuffed animal, which is actually a grenade, and almost blows her up. This next scene will tell you exactly what you're in for the rest of the movie. And I will tell you, this is where I was like ready to just get up and walk away from this because it's bad. In this next line, you can audibly hear Tiny Tina's actress cringe as she says, "Time to make it rain with your body parts." I guess they really just had a hard time finding a take that worked, or maybe they just left in the wrong take in the final edit. I did read somewhere that it was an editing hell at some point. After delivering that glorious line, Tiny Tina's throwing explosive stuffed animals at Lilith. But the problem is that the special effects here look so bad. It doesn't look like she's throwing anything. It looks very unnatural. Like, it's not that she's throwing something, but something is just appearing in her hand and being launched like a missile. They're not falling naturally. It doesn't look like a prop or anything. It just looks like someone pulled an object and then sped it up very fast. It's very strange looking, very jarring, and then when they hit the ground, they kind of just, you can almost see them disappear as it explodes. The explosion effect plays, and it just doesn't look right in any way. After avoiding the explosions, Lilith did realize the tracker she was given by Alice was destroyed in the fight, and she gave it to Claptrap, telling him to fix it. He pulls her gun on Tiny Tina, which prompts Tina to call out Krieg, who comes out of a bus behind Lilith. I want to stop here for a second before we get into the actual fight scene because costume design is awful. Krieg's mask looks like it was bought at Spirit Halloween and just painted over. He even has these like weird looking scars on him that look like they're just like stickers or something that they put on him. It doesn't look natural or real in any sense of the way. The costumes look very poorly designed in every way. I'm sure I could do a quick Google image search of Borderlands cosplay in the top 10 searches will be way better costumes than anything this movie came up with. Actually, how much was the budget for this movie? Oh, $130 million. Okay, so where did all that budget go to? Because it certainly didn't go into the special effects. It didn't go into the costumes or anything, or the set pieces. And it certainly didn't go to the writers' team. So, what happened to that $130 million? Anyway, getting back on track, the fight scene begins, and I actually think this part is a little cool. Greek is like deflecting bullets with his buzzsaw like a freaking Jedi, so that was kind of cool. But other than that, it was probably the highlight of the entire movie because there's not much else here. It's not going to get any better, and the action scenes do get worse. The fight scene ends with Lilith having her gun in Tiny Tina's face, and then Atlas shows up. Wait a minute, didn't like a minute earlier they established that the tracker was destroyed? How did Atlas know where they were? So either Atlas already knew where Tiny Tina was because they found her on their own, or they were following Lilith some other way and they didn't need the tracker. Either way, it defeats the entire purpose of why they introduced Lilith in the first place. The owner of Atlas was insisting that it has to be Lilith who goes to Pandora to find his so-called daughter, Tiny Tina. Lilith was very reluctant to go and didn't seem to even want to go in the first place until he offered her a bunch of money. So he went out his way to get Lilith for some reason, and I'll just spoil this right now. He did not know that she had any siren powers to begin with, neither did she. So he insisted on it being her, but he was able to find Tina either on his own with his own resources, or he was able to track Lilith and what she was doing to find Tina, which at that point you could have hired just about anyone. So why did it have to be Lilith? In fact, Claptrap found her pretty easily on the EchoNet, so that tells me Atlas, who has even more resources than some little robot like Claptrap, could have easily found Tina as well. In the game, it was through the help of Tannis that Atlas actually established the EchoNet themselves on Pandora. So, again, what did they need Lilith for? The person that's leading Atlas on this whole journey to find Tina planet-side is Commander Knox. Not to be confused with General Knox. I looked it up, and apparently she's like supposed to be the daughter of General Knox, but I don't understand why they didn't just use General Knox himself. It also seems like Lilith has no problem handing her over to Commander Knox at this point, as she doesn't act defensive to try to fight Commander Knox or anything. In fact, she seems very open to the idea of handing her over because then she'd get her bounty reward, I assume. Those troops also show up, and again, their outfits just look terrible. Their guns look like they're made out of cardboard, and the vehicles don't look even worn down or anything, and you would think they would be after driving around Pandora for so long. So after Atlas shows up, Commander Knox is given a stuffed animal by Tina, who tries to blow her up, but she realizes what's going on and tosses the bomb. The bomb ends up exploding in midair next to the structure that Tina and Lilith are standing on, which nearly kills Lilith and Tina on the platform. So Lilith and Tina nearly get crushed by the falling structure as they're trying to get off of it. Knox pulls up on her hovercraft and says she's going to take Tina, and Lilith just draws her pistol on her. Knox also draws her weapon in response to Lilith pulling her gun out on her. This doesn't make much sense for Lilith because she just wanted to make money. That's why she accepted the bounty, because it was such a high-paying one. She knew that the leader of Atlas Corporation was not a very good person. It's not like she cared. She was going to make a bunch of money off it. And then randomly, she pulls a gun on Knox, even though Knox is not responsible for the explosion. It was Tina. Just a few seconds before, she was willing to hand her over to Knox from what it seemed like. I just have a hard time understanding what the motive here was for how they wrote Lilith. They made her seem like she only cared about the money, and yet she's starting to protect Tina from Knox as if she cares all of a sudden, when a few seconds ago she didn't really care as long as she got paid. It's the same problem with how they wrote Roland. They're not giving any real moral compass to any characters, so we understand why they might be motivated to do something, why they think something is wrong. After everyone gets into the truck with Roland, there's a chase scene with a bunch of Atlas trucks following them, as well as those hover vehicles trying to chase them down. There's a whole scene with Knox flying around on her hovercraft, but it's so clear she's in front of a green screen. It just takes you out of the movie every time the special effects come up, because they don't look good in any sort of way. I would almost prefer that they didn't even put them in the movie at this point. After the whole chase scene, they blast through a treasure, and then they make a stop because they have a flat tire. Atlas stops following them after the pressure because there's like a canyon or something. Even though they have flying vehicles, Roland tells them they won't use their flying vehicles without backup on the ground. It's like, well, what's the whole point of the flying vehicles if you need ground backup at the point? While they're busy fixing the tire, Lilith asks a very good question. Why did Roland betray Atlas? How do we know we can trust Roland? Roland doesn't really answer for himself. Tina ends up answering and saying it's for the vault, and because Tina is special, and she's able to open up the vault. Lilith just scoffs and doesn't believe there's a vault to begin with, which she's established early on in the movie. But she reveals in this scene she doesn't believe in it because her mother was a vault hunter. Again, something that's not from the game, just something they kind of made up for the movie. Anyway, her and Tina start arguing, and Lilith just starts saying lines of like, "Oh, how are you going to open it with the power of friendship?" And then Roland just pulls out a gun on Lilith where her back is practically turned. Her gun is not drawn in any way. She's not threatening in any way to Tina right now. She's just arguing with her. Roland pulls out his gun, and dramatic music plays, and he's like, "We're doing it because we have a conscience." Okay, you have so much of conscience, you just pull a gun out on someone who doesn't have their weapon even drawn or is even a threat to you, and you're basically going to shoot them in the back because you don't like that they're questioning what's going on. Lilith just tells them they're in this together because of what Lilith did before, which in a way is true. She did betray Atlas for whatever reason. We also don't really get a true motive out of Roland. I mean, he just says that he doesn't want Atlas getting control of the Vault because he thinks they're bad people, but he served with them for a very long time, and he never explains why he thinks that, what his problems are with that. He is shown to having some kind of relationship with quite a few people because he was a soldier. They do show this throughout the movie, but it just doesn't land at all because it doesn't explain why he would do this. Whether he has a good heart or not, it doesn't explain why he thinks Atlas is such villains. But that's basically what the whole movie is. They don't explain anything. They write new stuff. They wipe away the old material. They don't explain why they're doing it or what's interesting about the new stuff that they've written for it. They just do it. If you told me that they had only seen screenshots and clips of the game and never read the story or anything else, I would completely believe you. I'm not going to really bother doing the research on it, but if some interview came out with an actor or writer or someone saying, "Oh yeah, we just thought the game was a bunch of people shooting, bad guys and making catchy one-liners, so we really wanted to expand upon that and make sure there's a real story there," I would not even roll my eyes because I would already know that's probably how they wrote this movie from the very beginning, considering what I've watched so far. Now they make their way to Sanctuary. There's some Easter eggs here. They meet Mox, and they kind of have a conversation with Mox. Lilith, in particular, has a personal conversation with her, where Mox tells her that her mother loved her and that she's special. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be some kind of foreshadowing to her siren powers, but it just doesn't really land at all. It just seems like, oh, your mother loved you and she thought you were a special girl. I mean, that's really how it landed. Anyway, the reason they're speaking to Mox in the first place is because they're trying to meet Tannis, and they need to meet Tannis because she's the one that knows where the vault keys are. There's a whole scene where an Atlas soldier played by Bobby Lee starts talking to Roland because he recognizes him, and he's just trying to play up to Roland so he can capture him. There's a bunch of jokes here. They weren't very funny. It ends with Mox knocking out the soldier, and then that's how Commander Knox, not to be confused with Mox, finds out about Roland and Tiny Tina potentially being Sanctuary. She comes investigating along with the rest of Atlas. From there, they finally meet up with Tannis, and Lilith confronts Tannis, and it's very clear that they have some kind of history together. Lilith seems to have a huge problem with Tannis. Tannis is like, okay, whatever. Turns out Tannis was supposed to care for Lilith when she was a child, and Lilith was given away by Tannis to some raiders who raised Lilith to be, I guess, a killer and another raider or something. They don't elaborate too much on it, but obviously Lilith is upset by this whole thing, that she doesn't want anything to do with Tannis, and Tannis' whole justification for this was, but your mother wanted you to be a survivor. Okay, then, I guess her mother wanted her to be a raider. I mean, the thing is, they kind of build up her mother being this villain. Like, the whole time, it seems like Lilith had this very neglectful mother who was a vault hunter who was just off doing God knows whatever, and then I guess she gets herself killed or something, and then she leaves her to Tannis, and Tannis is like, I don't want nothing to do with this, and just hands her off. That's how they basically wrote this whole thing up until this point. I kind of want to address on how Lilith was written up to this point. I feel like she has the emotional maturity of someone who's like 19. Not that that is a negative thing, but the fact that she's played by a woman who's in her mid-50s, and even in the movie, several times does the actress for Lilith say that she's older. So she acknowledges that she is older in the movie than, I guess, in the game. Alright, so they're self-aware that Lilith is being played by an older woman. However, she still has this emotional maturity of like a 19-year-old the entire time. She has no ability to really communicate with others properly or understand how to process some of her feelings and emotions, and that's kind of the entire plot of the movie. And I have to say, up until this point, if it seems like I can't always find the words to describe what exactly I've watched, it's because I can't. I don't understand how this movie was written, created, and greenlit across the board and pushed out for any reason. None of it makes any sense to me. Not the budget, not what went into it, not even the writing. Nothing makes any sense to me as to why and how this could have happened. Well, let's keep pushing through this because, yeah, this movie does keep going for some reason. Claptrap is running around town making an ass of himself, and of course that's what he does. I mean, that's probably the most realistic interpretation of Claptrap, but he gets them caught by Atlas, and Atlas starts hunting for them because they know they're in town, so they have to be smuggled out. During this time, they do learn that in order for them to get the last vault key, because apparently they already have two, they have to go to the Caustic Cavern. And this place, when they get there, they make a note of the fact that it is overrun with psychos. Once they enter the caverns, the movie makes a point to show you that there is this river of acid that is corrosive. And they even say themselves, it is corrosive to everything but natural forming crystals in the cavern. Okay, this is important for later because I'm going to address the PG-13 aspect of this movie. Basically, they find the psychos and they have to get past them, so they send Claptrap in to make a distraction. During this time, Claptrap says a bunch of stuff to the psychos to kind of piss them off. And, I mean, in the right light, I do like some toilet humor. I mean, it makes me laugh. But in this case, it felt like they wrote originally something a little bit more vulgar. But the movie being PG-13, they had to change up a lot of the lines, which feels like that a lot in the movie, actually. And because of that, it doesn't quite deliver the way I think it should have landed originally. So it doesn't end up really being funny at all. I am going off memory here, and I'm not going to say everything exactly, just because I feel like YouTube might have a problem with some of it. But Claptrap essentially told them that they should eat excrement until they get sick and die from it. This prompts the psychos to all pull out their guns and start shooting Claptrap, who, at this point, they're going to establish that he's pretty much immune to bullets, because even though he gets shot a bunch, he doesn't die or take any real damage. In fact, right as he gets out and he meets back up with the group, he kind of like sheds his shell. It was actually kind of cool when that happens. He sheds his shell and like a new shell appears and it looks all pristine and stuff. So, but otherwise, yeah, they establish that Claptrap isn't going to really be harmed by bullets. So they get to the area where they're looking for the crystal, because the crystal is apparently in one of these boxes, and Lilith is instantly attracted to some box where she finds the crystal. Again, foreshadowing, she's a siren. The Rise are about to leave with the key and everything's fine. Claptrap starts what is essentially diarrhea, where he shoots out all the bullets from his back end. And I think there's even a clip on YouTube, they use it for promotional material. But Claptrap is essentially like, oh, I can't stop. I have to drop this fat one right now, is what he says. And so he's shooting out all these bullet shells, and it's just making a lot of noise, and it causes the psychos to find out where they are. And this is important. This is where I think that the movie may have not actually originally been written as PG-13, because this fight scene is very strange to me, and maybe it is just bad. And I mean, that is the whole movie. It's just bad. But the way the fight scene is done with these psychos gives me the inclination that, hey, they might have not actually made this movie originally PG-13. So they're trying to get away, and they're fighting with the psychos and everything, and there's these scenes where whenever the psychos are getting shot, there's no feedback on the actor's end. What I mean by that is, normally when you're watching a movie or something, you would notice that when someone gets shot, there's like a bullet explosion effect on their body or something, right? Or a hole comes up. But they made a point of not showing any blood. So there's no blood, and the actors just kind of fall, right? There's no real bullet response on the actors or their body. On top of that, like when Krieg slices somebody with his buzzsaw, there's no blood or anything. In fact, it doesn't even feel like anything's happening. It almost feels like he's just whacking them. There's no real feedback. There's even a scene where Tiny Tina gets on someone's back, and I guess she snaps their neck, but there's no sound or anything to imply what really happened. He just falls over. I also noticed that the camera seems to cut almost any time someone's getting shot or killed on screen to avoid showing their deaths on screen. Furthermore, the camera is very shaky, so it's hard to always make out what's happening. The action is just really hurt by the fact that they made all these quick cuts and they're not really showing anything. There's even a scene where Tiny Tina stabs some guy on the ground and you don't see it at all. And here's the number one piece of evidence I feel like it was not originally made for PG-13. There's a point where Krieg shoves someone's head into a pipe, which explodes with the acid that was mentioned earlier will melt through anything. And yet, for some reason, when he pulls back, it looks like he's going to show the guy's face all melted on camera, and then it cuts. I truly believe this movie was made with the intent of being a rated R movie, and the executives or something were like, no, kids love video games, so we got to make it PG-13. That's the only way I can think that this happened. The whole scene ends with them in a hallway, and they're trying to go up an elevator, but the elevator's not working, so Roland stays behind to connect the elevator wires by hand so that they can all get away. And then Roland has a sacrifice scene, but I'll just spoil it now. He lives through it. It doesn't really have any meaning. And it's not a very interesting scene anyways. The elevator at the same time is going too fast that it's going to basically collide with the ceiling and kill everyone. And all of a sudden they get teleported because Lilith instinctively teleports them. Now Tina thinks she did it, but it was Lilith who had teleported them. The scene was also interesting to me because, again, it kind of backtracks on Lilith actually giving a shit about anything because you have Tina concerned about Roland and his safety, and Lilith just kind of makes a remark, kind of pushing it aside, saying, oh, he's a trained soldier, he'll be fine. Which circumvents the whole point of them pretending like Roland might have just died in that previous scene, because they did. They try to imply that he got killed. So it's just... they just don't even care about the characters they're writing. And you can say Borderlands itself wasn't very serious about when it came to death, but yeah, it was when it came to major characters. When, spoiler alert for Borderlands 2, when Roland died in the game, it was a very serious moment, and there was repercussions for characters going into the DLC when it came to dealing with it. So at this point, they made camp at night, and they are going over where the vault is now that they have the 3 keys, because it displays some kind of map to show them where it's at. And during this time, Tannis reveals that, hey, you know, the siren that opens the portal to the vault may very well die. And Lilith's just like, are you serious? Why didn't you say anything now? And she's like, well, if it means Atlas doesn't get it, that's fine. Tannis basically says, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. But, I mean, if Tina is the key, then why even bother with this if you just don't want them getting it? You could do more to keep her away from it. How does opening the vault protect the vault? It just doesn't make any sense. This is why the original game had them as vault hunters, because they had a motive to open the vault because they wanted what was inside the vault, whether it was treasure or finding some important thing to make their lives better. Ultimately, here, their whole goal is to prevent Atlas from getting the vault by getting all the pieces and enabling them to get the vault. This is why I don't see any point in rewriting so much, because they did nothing with the rewrite. They made it worse. They hurt everything that they were trying to do. Whatever they wanted us to see, we didn't see it. All we saw was, hey, these characters are not making any sense at all in their actions, but at the same time, they have to follow the basic outline that was the Borderlands plot. At the very base level, they have to still do that. So during the same night, Lilith gets her tracker back because Claptrap decided to repair it after all for her, and then she goes to destroy it, only a drone flies in, and the big bad shows up again, who I completely forgot about up until this point. And he's like, oh, but don't worry. I still know exactly where you are, and you're leading us straight to the vault. Lilith just replies, oh, so that wasn't really a tracker. It was a piece of junk. And then the villain's like, no, it was a tracker. But we're still tracking you in other ways, so what does it matter? And then he threatens her and says, hey, if you don't make sure we get to the vault, then we're going to kill all your friends, so you better make sure it happens. Tina seems to tell end of this and just thinks that Lilith has betrayed them and was with Atlas all along, and then tries to kill Lilith by throwing a grenade at her. Once Lilith wakes up from the point-blank grenade explosion, Claptrap tells her that there's a nearby village that they had went to, and so she tries to track them down. When she gets to the village, she realizes this is the village she grew up in when she was a kid. There's then this flashback scene where her and her mother are running towards a ship to get out of the town because it's being attacked by bandits. And the weirdest thing happens here. Her mother gives her the Tannis and then just leaves her there. The opportunity for the mother to leave was there. She could have just got on the ship with her child and leave. But she didn't. She gave her the Tannis and let her fly away, and they never established why. They maybe kind of hint maybe she was trying to save, I guess, vault research or something, but it didn't make any sense because ultimately it turns out her motive for giving her child the Tannis in the first place was to protect Lilith because she knew Lilith was a siren and could open the vault. So why didn't she just go with Lilith herself and make sure she was protected? Tannis couldn't be trusted because Tannis gave her away to raiders. Those raiders then turned her into a killer, which would have very likely awakened her siren powers when she was younger. None of this makes any sense. Her mother should have just gone with her. This whole arc of her being upset with her mom and everything is literally because her mom left her and then let herself be killed by raiders for no reason. So then Lilith and Claptrap go to Lilith's old home. During that time, Claptrap sees a drawing of a stick figure with wings and passes out saying that he remembers something, and then a hologram pops up of her mother. Her mother talks to her through the hologram, which is like a recording. So basically, Claptrap was programmed by her mother to help Lilith whenever she came back to the planet, it looks like. But basically, her mother tells her, "Oh, I miss you. I wish I could hold you and I love you, but I sent you away because you're actually the siren that you wanted to find out. You're the Firehawk, the reincarnation of the goddess." And it's just, it falls very flat because, again, if she wanted to protect her, she should have just gone with her daughter. She would have probably done a lot better job of it. The next scene plays out, and Tina and Tannis and Krieg have found the vault location. They try to open up the vault, and of course it doesn't open up because Tiny Tina is not a siren, and so they're very confused by what's happening. Atlas shows up because, of course, they've been following them this whole time. Atlas came with a bunch of reinforcements. They got bandits on their side as well as the Crimson Lancers, and a whole ship with them that can fire disintegrating laser beams. The leader of Atlas is happy he found the location of the vault, but now realizing Tina can't open the vault, says he's going to take her back and dissect her and try to make another Tina who can open up the vault for him. But then Roland shows up and starts shooting at the leader. However, the bullets don't hit him because he has a special shield on that he can't seem to penetrate with regular bullets. The leader of Atlas then tells Nox to take Tina into their custody, and all of a sudden, for no reason, Nox says, "Everyone put your guns down. We're not doing this anymore." And as she stands next to Roland, she's about to give this heartfelt speech about how she realizes how wrong Atlas is. And let me just say, they never once in this entire movie mentioned that Nox had any problem with what she was doing. Any scenes that she showed up in, she gave no inkling that she had any issue with what she was doing, and was always more than happy to do what she's being ordered to do. Either way, as she's about to give this whole speech to Roland about how wrong they all are, she gets disintegrated by the ship. You know, honestly, it made me chuckle, but I doubt I laughed for the reason the writers wanted me to. This scene is the entire movie in a nutshell. Just like how they vaporized Nox, they vaporized the entire story and lore of Borderlands to make this god-awful mess of a so-called movie. And for what? I feel like no one cared, just like they didn't care about what Nox was trying to say. They didn't care about what they were writing. They didn't care about what they were directing. They didn't care about what they were producing. I still don't know what they blew the $130 million on. It's at this point Lilith shows back up to save the day, who now, for some reason, knows how to use her powers at will because I guess she found out she was a siren, and now she can just do them because she found out she was a siren. There's no scene that kind of explains what she does. She just does. And then she offers to open up the vault because Atlas keeps threatening that he's going to kill everyone and all her friends if she doesn't do it. So she says, "Okay, I'll do it." She proceeds to open the vault, and I'm wondering, are they really going to have the monster come out and kill everyone and have to fight the monster? Will that be the payoff like it was in the original Borderlands? What actually happens is Lilith gets a power up and she starts flying around on her fire wings and she becomes Firehawk. Well, she's blowing everyone up with her fireballs, she's fighting the ship, and she's powering up her teammates so they can't be shot, and they're taking out Atlas and the bandits, and there's this whole fight scene that happens. It just doesn't really make much sense because it misses the entire point of what the original Borderlands plot even was going for, that the vault was kind of not a vault for treasure, it was a vault to contain a threat. It was a threat to the galaxy that the Iridians recognized, and they locked it away. And that was kind of the plot twist at the end of Borderlands. It was a very interesting plot twist. I know it was kind of controversial at the time. But ultimately, this giving Lilith like a Deus Ex Machina power up so she can, defeat Atlas and all the bandits here. There's also more scenes showing that the CGI and special effects are just so terrible. There's a scene where Tiny Tina is throwing grenades at people, and the soldiers are just staring at her, not even guns drawn. Like, they're just standing straight, looking at her dead in the eyes. She throws a grenade, and you can visibly see them disappear on screen. They don't even blow up in the explosion. There's no effects of them being affected by an explosion. You just see them disappear from the screen right as the explosion hits. It's super obvious. It's not even hidden. I mean, at this point, I'm convinced I'm watching the unedited version of the movie because some of this is just so sloppy. I can't imagine that this was watched by anyone. It was just greenlit. Like, hey, yeah, that's what we want to see. That's a great movie. Anyway, after the fight ends, it has Atlas holding Tina hostage because he managed to slip away while they are defeating everyone else, and he forces Lilith to open the vault, which she gladly does with no hesitation. She goes into the vault with Atlas and Tiny Tina, and during that time, it's like Lilith is not fazed by anything that's happened. She already seems to know everything that was going to happen beforehand. At this point, I don't see the monster, and I'm just like, the vault looks kind of empty. It's not very interesting. The guy's freaking out because he thinks the technology is very interesting or something. I don't know. But then it's revealed, hey, the monster is there. It has some tentacles come out, and they basically take Atlas and drag him down to his doom. While Lilith's like, well, you won't be alone here. And then she takes Tina, and they both leave. And that's it. That's the movie. That's the end of it. Um, they do have like a fireworks celebration scene, but they did nothing. They missed the entire point of what the vault was supposed to be about. The entire movie can basically be summed up as Lilith has mommy issues, and she sees herself in Tina. Everyone else is just kind of a side character because no one else has any real lines other than Tina and Lilith. Everyone else is just kind of there as a background character. Like I said, Krieg doesn't do much of anything other than some fight scenes and some one-liners that aren't very good. They're not his best one-liners, right? And Roland is just Kevin Hart. He doesn't feel like Roland in any sort of way, and he doesn't even have that many lines to begin with, even though Roland should be a major character. This is just classic Hollywood when it comes to adapting source material, especially when it comes to gaming. They have to put their own spin and mark on it because it has to be theirs. It can't be someone else's product of genius, because if they allow that to happen, they acknowledge that, then they are somehow incapable of writing themselves, which is not the case here. They could have done a lot more to flesh out the original game, because the original game is a little bit bare bones sometimes when it comes to story. It's just that they didn't care to even learn about what Borderlands is about. They didn't care to learn what these characters represent, and they definitely didn't learn to represent what the source material was about, because they missed every mark. Every opportunity they had, they missed it, and they missed it without even trying to hit it. And I'll also say this: Borderlands as a franchise is weaker for this movie. This movie coming out, I feel like, hurt Borderlands' reputation more than ever helping it. It hurt anyone that may have been interested in the games, or interested in the lore, or interested in trying things out, and it definitely hurt any longtime fans of having any faith that this franchise is going to get back on the road after Borderlands 3 and its story. I mean, a couple of years ago, Randy Pitchford was on stage at a gaming conference. Instead of announcing a game, he was talking about the movie to everyone's confusion. I mean, Randy was obviously hyped for it at some point, yet I know he watches questionable material, but there's no way even he sat down and watched this and was like, yeah, that's Borderlands right there. That's my franchise. Anyway, I ranted long enough on this matter. I clearly am a little passionate about this, but ultimately, this is a travesty, and I really wish they just did what WB did with some of their movies recently and just threw this thing in the trash, made sure no one saw the light of day with it, and taxed Rodeo off, because I don't know what else they did with that $130 million. For me, this movie is going down as Dragon Ball Evolution. I'm going to pretend like it doesn't exist, and if anyone ever tries to talk to me about it, I'm going to act like I don't know what you're talking about and it doesn't exist. We all collectively gaslight ourselves as a fandom to never believe this movie was real. We should be okay. We might be able to recover from this. Either way, if you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. Have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching.